Senator Bernardi. Senator Macdonald.
Mr Acting Deputy President, and it's a pleasure to take part in this debate following Senator Bernardi, who has a wonderful turn of phrase, and his perspicuity in his comments about the Xenophon team and the Greens are worth recording for posterity, and I congratulate Senator Bernardi for his understanding and shouting out of two political parties who are really a waste of time and a waste of space. I might say oxygen thieves when it comes to serious policy debate in this chamber. Mr Acting Deputy President, the cashless debit card, as many senators have said, was first introduced on a trial basis in March of 2016 at Ceduna in South Australia, and this was followed by further trials at Kununurra and Wyndham in the Kimberley. These trials, by anyone's assessments, have been unmitigated success. Alcohol consumption in these communities has fallen, gambling and illicit substance abuse have been curtailed, and alcohol-related violence has been reduced. And it's also been reported that 30% of people impacted by the reform have reported being better able to care for their families and to save money. Now, some cynics might say it's only 30%, it's not 100%, but can I say in this area of social policy, having 30% of a selected group better off is well worth the effort of undertaking the exercise. The measures in the current bill will remove some limitations on the rollout of the cashless welfare card and allow the program to be introduced into my state of Queensland, and that's really why I am contributing to this debate. I know, Mr Acting Deputy President, that in the last budget the government announced that the cashless welfare card would be expanded to 2 new locations, and one of them is in my home state of Queensland in the Bundaberg and Hervey Bay region. Hervey Bay, Bundaberg in the Maryborough area, central Queensland. One of the parts of Queensland that perhaps has the lowest socio-economic profile, and it's one where there are real concerns with family violence, with alcohol and drug abuse, and with various other forms of addiction that have impacted on so many families. This, Mr Acting Deputy President, is good news for my state of Queensland, certainly good news for the people of Bundaberg. And I know that the local federal member for Hinkler, Mr Pitt, consulted widely, as did the department, in relation to introduction in the Bundaberg-Hervey Bay area, and all sensible and mature community leaders support the extension of the trial to that region. I'm very hopeful, Mr Acting Deputy President, that a similar initiative will be taken in the Townsville region, where I have my office and where I live, in just south of Townsville, in a place called Ayr, because Townsville, regrettably, has been hit by very high unemployment and all of the social problems that that follow unemployment and despair. Small business has been struggling, but the unemployment is too high. There are some bright lights on the horizon. For example, already 800 families have been employed in the Townsville region by the Adani company as part of their railway line construction for the coalfields in the Galilee Basin. And I cannot understand why Labor politicians, particularly like the Labor member for Herbert, Ms Cathy O'Toole, are lukewarm the most positive way I can say it, lukewarm in the support for this construction initiative, which would mean so much for the Townsville district. I and my party support the Adani project because of the jobs it would create. Already, I repeat, 800 families have got jobs in the Townsville region thanks to Adani. And the Labor Mayor of Townsville, Councillor Jenny Hill, very courageous person, but Councillor Hill is fully committed to the Adani project. Why? Because it means jobs for Townsville people, it means a real boost for small business in Townsville. And I've asked Councillor Hill to join with me in seeking a clarification from the Labor opposition leader, Mr Shorten, on the comments he made as part of his campaign to retain the seat of Batman and stem an onslaught from the Greens political party. Unfortunately, it seems that the opposition leader is trying to match the Greens' promises in any way that needs to be done to try and retain that seat. And quite frankly, I don't care what happens in Batman, but I do care about the impact of the promises Mr Shorten is making in Batman on the workers of North and Central Queensland. Similarly, I cannot understand why the CFMEU, the M being mining, I cannot understand why they are not wholeheartedly supporting the Adani project for the jobs it would create in railway construction, in mine construction, and then eventually in an export-oriented mine in Central Queensland. Because the construction and the mining workers would be members of the CFMEU, and I know the CFMEU has a huge influence in the operations and policy of the ALP, and it simply beggars my belief on why the CFMEU would just be following the old Labor line of anti-everything, because it's their members who would actually benefit from Adani. But I've digressed slightly, Mr Acting Deputy President. This cashless welfare card helps many job seekers establish the security and stability they need in their lives to effectively re-enter that employment market. Mr Acting Deputy President, the card has been proven to work, has been proven to reduce domestic violence, has been proven to have better outcomes for those who do use some of their welfare money for alcohol and drugs. And it's clear that not everyone does that, but there is a significant proportion of the community on welfare who do use the money for alcohol, for drugs, for gambling, which means their family and their children do without. And the reported cases of alcohol-fuelled violence and violence because families don't have enough to eat, don't have enough to send the kids to school properly, that causes family problems. And here is a solution which has been proved to work in Ceduna and in the Kimberleys. It's been proved to work. It does bring benefits. And Mr Acting Deputy President, that's why I support this rollout to the Bundaberg, Maryborough, Hervey Bay area of my state of Queensland. And that's why the community leaders in those communities also support this. And I look forward to the day when community leaders in Townsville will petition for the cashless welfare card to be introduced in the Townsville region. Again, I cannot understand why the Labor member for Herbert, Ms Cathy O'Toole, opposes this, because she knows better than I do about the impact of alcohol-related family violence, of the problems of children not having the right money, the right food, the right money for school, the right food, because the welfare recipient has used the money for gambling or drugs, or more often in my region on alcohol. Now again, I acknowledge this is not 100% of the people. I'm not putting everyone in that same basket, but for those who already clearly well manage their welfare checks, this proposal is not going to affect them one iota, not one iota. And why Ms O'Toole would be supporting the Greens in their opposition to this real initiative to stop child abuse, child lack of food for children, lack of proper schooling. It just, I simply cannot believe it. And I hear Senator Siewert screaming out something from over on the crossbenches about this not being true, but I'm sorry, I will take my advice from people who know. And that is the department who are interested, who do the surveys, who follow these things. They're not part of a political party that simply wants to compete with Labor on the rush to the left in the hope that they might win a seat in Batman. These are proven results. And even although, as I say, it won't affect 100% of the people, even if you can see a noticeable difference in the families of 30% of those impacted, then that's got to be a good thing. And as I say, and I repeat, Mr Acting Deputy President, the evidence shows that those who are doing the right thing with their welfare won't be impacted at all, because they already spend their money not on alcohol, not on drugs, not on gambling, but on buying food for their families and children, and making sure their children have sufficient resources to attend school and attend school as part of the school community in the normal way. Those people are already doing it. So giving them the cashless credit card is not going to make one iota of difference. And I cannot understand, as I say, people like Ms O'Toole who claim some interest in this area, some expertise in a past life in the area. She would know better than I of the impacts on families of drug and alcohol abuse and of gambling abuse. And this cashless credit card is a great way to go and assist those families. Mr Acting Deputy President, the government that doesn't try to break that cycle of loss of self-esteem is being irresponsible in the extreme. The social impacts on affected communities, as everyone who involves themselves with this area will know, are disastrous. And add to that the psychological impact on people who abuse substances, who are receiving benefits. This is a recipe for entering a never-ending cycle of self-harming behaviours, which include gambling, alcohol abuse and illicit substance abuse. And, Mr Acting Deputy President, we as a government feel that we have a responsibility to try and help those families who, for whatever reason, are not able to help themselves. I repeat, those that can help themselves, this won't make any difference to, because those families already spend the money on the right things. This will only impact upon those who do abuse alcohol and gambling, and it will try to put those families in a situation where...
Order.
Well, I'll take the interjection, Senator Pratt, because if you'd been listening to me, you would have heard me say twice already, that I am not saying that 100% of people on welfare abuse alcohol and drugs, but there are 30% of affected families who have been proven to be better off. And isn't even 30% worth it? I cannot believe people who are supposedly compassionate, who abhor domestic violence, who abhor substance or allegedly abhor substance and gambling abuse, cannot see that this is a good step in the right direction. It's not the panacea, but it's a step in the right direction, and it is helping some families get proper food, the kids being properly equipped to attend school, and gives those people in those families the self-esteem to try and move forward to get one of these jobs in the Townsville region, the Bundaberg region, when they come from initiatives being taken by the federal government, and I might say, and I repeat, from the employment that will be created when Adani gets into full swing. So, Mr Acting Deputy President, I support this project very, very strongly. As a Queenslander, I hope it can be introduced into the Hinkler region, as the department proposes, very quickly. And as soon as practically we can do it, I would hope the Townsville community will embrace this to lead for a better life for their citizens.
Thank you, Senator Macdonald. Perfect timing, it being 12:45. I shall now proceed to Senators' statements. Senator Macdonald.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. Well, during the Christmas so-called break that parliamentarians allegedly have, you know, when we take a couple of months off on holidays, as many of the public believe is the case, I know a lot of other senators and members of the other House actually use those couple of months to get around, talk to their constituents, and to become better acquainted with some of the issues in their electorates. My electorate, of course, is the state of Queensland. It's a pretty big electorate to try and cover, but in the period between the sittings of Parliament, I took it upon myself to visit different parts of the state, particularly speaking with local authorities, local government. I myself used to be a member of a local council before I came into this Parliament, and I was once, back in the glory days, the Minister for Local Government, so I've always had a close affiliation with local government. And I find that as you move around a big state like Queensland, a decentralised state like Queensland, you can't sort of visit everyone and speak to everyone in various communities to find out what's happening, what they need. And so I've always made it the practice of calling on the local council, because the local council is made up of community people who've been elected by their peers and who understand exactly what's happening in every community and what those communities' aspirations are. And in this break I called on the Central Highlands Regional Council in the wonderful town of Emerald in central Queensland, if I could call it that. Emerald is a wonderful city. It's a great example of what agriculture, good agriculture, can do to a region. I do lament that some of the mining towns in Queensland are doing it a bit tough, and it's always going to be the case because mines come and go. But Emerald is a classic example of great agriculture, export-orientated agriculture, and a very proactive council. And why is there good agriculture there? Well, there's good soil, but there's good soil in a lot of places. But there was a dam there, the Fairbairn Dam, built, of course, by a Liberal Country Party government, I think, back in the days, I think when Mr Fairbairn was the Minister for National Development or something, and that's going back in history. But because of that dam, there is practically unlimited water in this central Queensland, inland central Queensland area, which enables that community to grow cotton, grain crops, practically anything that has a market can be grown there. And I pleased to say, and I just want to mention this in passing, that in Emerald at the moment there's an outfit called 2PH run by the Presler family, who export mandarins, would you believe, to the world, to Taiwan, to Japan, to China, to all countries in South America, and they are in the throes of establishing new markets in the Middle East. And I said to them when I was down there, when I called out to see them, and noted to my amazement that the huge area they had under mandarins had almost doubled. It's just an incredible story. They were on the bones of their bums, one might say, some years ago when citrus canker came and really destroyed their industry. The government eventually provided some compensation to all of the citrus growers in that area, and as a result of that, the Preslers have built this wonderful business with the sorts and types of varieties of mandarins that people actually want to buy around the world. It's a huge success story. They employ, I think it's 40 local people and 60 of the Pacific Island Workers Program, which is great for Australia because that's part of our foreign aid to those countries. It's a real success story. But while I was there, I spoke with the Mayor, Councillor Kerry Hayes, and Deputy Mayor, Councillor Gail Godwin-Smith, and Councillor Paul Bell, an old mate of mine from a long time ago, who used to be once the LGAQ and the ALGA president, and other councillors there. And it was good to catch up with them and hear of their successes and their aspirations. I then moved on to the North Burnett Council, and centred in the town of Gayndah, although it has several smaller communities in that North Burnett region as part of this new enlarged shire. And I had a very interesting conversation with the Mayor, Councillor Rachel Chambers, and she obviously has a very intellectual, a very assiduous, astute view or understanding of the importance of smaller regional towns. And she said to me, and I want to repeat this, she said to me that the governments, Queensland and Australian governments, have got to make a decision on whether they want small country towns to exist in Australia, or do they want everyone to move to the capital cities on the coast. And a very perspective view on the world, and I was delighted to learn and listen from Councillor Chambers on some of those issues. Mr Acting Deputy President, I later met with the Mayor of the Carpentaria Shire, Councillor Jack Borden, and he has a number of initiatives going in that Gulf area of Queensland, that northwestern part of Queensland. Councillor Barden's had some success, or knows of the success of the government's Building Better Regions program. We put a fibre optic cable between Burketown and Doomadgee. That's not in his shire, that's in the Berkshire. But he was next door and he knows of that. So he's got an application in for a fibre optic between Corumba and Normanton. And it certainly has my success, that project, and I wish him well in his application to the Stronger Regions program for that. I might say Councillor Bowden's learnt well, because he's got about 5 or 6 different applications in to the federal government's proposals, which are all aimed at making regions stronger. I also visited the Cook Shire, met with Mayor Councillor Peter Scott there, talking about that great shire, which is really everything north of Mossman, Port Douglas area, the whole of the Cape. There are some Indigenous councils in that area, but the rest of the area of the Cape is looked after by the Cook Shire. And I was able to discuss many things with Councillor Scott, but the one thing that interested me is his reminder that in 2020 is the 250th anniversary of Captain Cook's ship, the Endeavour, beaching on a river that is now called the Endeavour River, and repairing his boat there. And I might say the celebrations will highlight this aspect. This was the first act of reconciliation between Europeans and Indigenous people, as the two communities got on very well together after one initial misunderstanding, but got on very well together in the 48 days that Captain Cook and his crew were there. I also spoke to the Mayor of the Wudjil Aboriginal Shire, Mayor Desmond Taylor, a very committed guy, interested in promoting his communities, and I'm helping him and other Indigenous councils with a new grouping that they hope to get together to do better buying for Indigenous councils in the Cape and in the North. And finally, I met with the Douglas Shire Mayor, Councillor Julie Liu. That was a shire that centres around Port Douglas and Mossman. It was originally under a Labor government initiative, joined with Cairns, totally inappropriate. Fortunately, there was 2 years of a Newman government and they put the Douglas Shire back to where it belonged. Councillor Liu is very environmentally aware. She and I differ slightly on the need to establish in a better way the road between the Daintree and Cooktown, which other mayors in the area support and which I think would be a good idea. Councillor Liu's not quite certain about it and thinks that there could be problems, but it was good to catch up with these people. So, Mr Acting Deputy President, it's been an interesting time to meet with these very differing communities, to find out problems they might have, but more importantly, to discuss with them their aspirations and to see where we as a federal government can help these communities in achieving the future that they wish.
Thank you, Senator Macdonald.